The North Sea is a marginal sea of the Atlantic Ocean located between Great Britain, Scandinavia, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. An epeiric sea on the European continental shelf. It connects to the ocean through the English Channel in the south and the Norwegian Sea in the north. It is more than 970 kilometers long and 580 kilometers wide, with an area of around 570,000 square kilometers. The North Sea has long been the site of important European shipping lanes, as well as a major fishery. The sea is a popular destination for recreation and tourism in bordering countries, and more recently has developed into a rich source of energy resources, including fossil fuels, wind, and early efforts in wave power. Historically, the North Sea has featured prominently in geopolitical and military affairs, particularly in Northern Europe, but also globally through the power Northern Europeans projected worldwide during much of the Middle Ages and into the modern era. The North Sea was the center of the Vikings' rise. Subsequently, the Hanseatic League, the Netherlands, and the British each sought to dominate the North Sea and thus the access to the markets and resources of the world. As Germany's only outlet to the ocean, the North Sea continued to be strategically important through both world wars. The coast of the North Sea presents a diversity of geological and geographical features. In the north, deep fjords and sheer cliffs mark the Norwegian and Scottish coastlines, whereas in the south it consists primarily of sandy beaches and wide mudflats. Due to the dense population, heavy industrialization, and intense use of the sea and area surrounding it, there have been a number of environmental issues affecting the sea's ecosystems. Environmental concerns, commonly including overfishing, industrial and agricultural runoff, dredging, and dumping among others, have led to a number of efforts to prevent degradation of the sea while still making use of its economic potential. Geography. North Sea, Norwegian Skareng ch. The North Sea is bounded by the Orkney Islands and east coast of Great Britain to the west and the northern and central European mainland to the east and south, including Norway, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. In the southwest, beyond the Straits of Dover, the North Sea becomes the English Channel connecting to the Atlantic Ocean. In the east, it connects to the Baltic Sea via the Skagerrak and Kattegat, narrow straits that separate Denmark from Norway and Sweden respectively. In the north it is bordered by the Shetland Islands, and connects with the Norwegian Sea, which lies in the very northeastern part of the Atlantic. The North Sea is more than 970 kilometers long and 580 kilometers wide, with an area of 570,000 square kilometers and a volume of 54,000 cubic kilometers. Around the edges of the North Sea are sizable islands and archipelagos, including Shetland, Orkney, and the Frisian Islands. The North Sea receives fresh water from a number of European continental watersheds, as well as the British Isles. A large part of the European drainage basin empties into the North Sea, including water from the Baltic Sea. The largest and most important rivers flowing into the North Sea are the Elbe and the Rhine. Meuse watershed. Around 185 million people live in the catchment area of the rivers discharging into the North Sea, encompassing some highly industrialized areas. Major features. For the most part, the sea lies on the European continental shelf with a mean depth of 90 meters. The only exception is the Norwegian Trench, which extends parallel to the Norwegian shoreline from Oslo to an area north of Bergen. It is between 20 and 30 kilometers wide and has a maximum depth of 725 meters. The Dogger Bank, a vast moraine, or accumulation of unconsolidated glacial debris, rises to a mere 15 to 30 meters below the surface. This feature has produced the finest fishing location of the North Sea. The long 40s and the broad 14s are large areas with roughly uniform depth in fathoms. These great banks and others make the North Sea particularly hazardous to navigate. which has been alleviated by the implementation of satellite navigation systems. The Devil's Hole lies 200 miles east of Dundee, Scotland. The feature is a series of asymmetrical trenches between 20 and 30 kilometers long, 1 and 2 kilometers wide and up to 230 meters deep. Other areas which are less deep are Cleaver Bank, Fisher Bank, and Nordhinder Bank. Extent. The International Hydrographic Organization defines the limits of the North Sea as follows. On the southwest, a line joining the Walder Lighthouse and Leathercoat Point. On the northwest, from Dunnet Head in Scotland to Torness in the island of Hoy, thence through this island to the Came of Hoy, on to Breakness on mainland, through this island to Coster Head and to Inverness in Westray, through Westray to Bow Head, across to Mull Head and on to Sealskerry and thence to Horse Island. On the north, from the north point of the mainland of the Shetland Islands, across to Gravelandness in the island of Yell, through Yell to Gloopness and across to Spoonness in Unst Island, through Unst to Hermanness, on to the SW point of the Rumblings and to Muckleflugger, all these being included in the North Sea area, thence up the meridian of 0 degrees 53 west to the parallel of 61 degrees 00 north and eastward along this parallel to the coast of Norway, the whole of Viking Bank being thus included in the North Sea. On the east, the western limit of the Skagerrak, a line joining Hans Thumb and the Naze. Hydrology, temperature and salinity. The average temperature in summer is 17 degrees Celsius and 6 degrees Celsius in the winter. The average temperatures have been trending higher since 1988, which has been attributed to climate change. Air temperatures in January range on average between 0 to 4 degrees Celsius and in July between 13 to 18 degrees Celsius. The winter months see frequent gales and storms. The salinity averages between 34 to 35 grams of salt per liter of water. The salinity has the highest variability where there is fresh water inflow, such as at the Rhine and Elbe estuaries, the Baltic Sea exit and along the coast of Norway. Water circulation and tides. The main pattern to the flow of water in the North Sea is an anti-clockwise rotation along the edges. The North Sea is an arm of the Atlantic Ocean, receiving the majority of ocean current from the northwest opening, and a lesser portion of warm current from the smaller opening at the English Channel. These tidal currents leave along the Norwegian coast. Surface and deep water currents may move in different directions. Low salinity surface coastal waters move offshore, and deeper, denser high salinity waters move inshore. The North Sea, located on the continental shelf, has different waves from those in deep ocean water. The wave speeds are diminished and the wave amplitudes are increased. In the North Sea there are two amphidromic systems and a third incomplete amphidromic system. In the North Sea the average tide difference in wave amplitude is between 0 to 8 meters. The Kelvin tide of the Atlantic Ocean is a semi-diurnal wave that travels northward. Some of the energy from this wave travels through the English Channel into the North Sea. The wave still travels northward in the Atlantic Ocean, and once past the northern tip of Great Britain, the Kelvin wave turns east and south and once again enters into the North Sea. Selected tide ranges coast. The eastern and western coasts of the North Sea are jagged, formed by glaciers during the Ice Ages. The coastlines along the southernmost part are covered with the remains of deposited glacial sediment. The Norwegian mountains plunge into the sea, creating deep fjords and archipelagos. South of Stavanger, the coast softens. The islands become fewer. The eastern Scottish coast is similar, though less severe than Norway. From northeast of England, the cliffs become lower and are composed of less resistant moraine, which erodes more easily, so that the coasts have more rounded contours. In Holland, Belgium and in East Anglia the littoral is low and marshy. The east coast and southeast of the North Sea have coastlines that are mainly sandy and straight owing to longshore drift, particularly along Belgium and Denmark. Coastal management. The southern coastal areas were originally amphibious floodplains and swampy land. As early as 500 BC, people were constructing artificial dwelling hills higher than the prevailing flood levels. It was only around the beginning of the High Middle Ages, in 1200 AD, that inhabitants began to connect single ring dikes into a dike line along the entire coast, thereby turning amphibious regions between the land and the sea into permanent solid ground. The modern form of the dikes, supplemented by overflow and lateral diversion channels, began to appear in the 17th and 18th centuries. Built in the Netherlands, the North Sea floods of 1953 and 1962 were impetus for further raising of the dikes as well as the shortening of the coastline so as to present as little surface area as possible to the punishment of the sea and the storms. Currently, 27% of the Netherlands is below sea level, protected by dikes, dunes, and beach flats. Coastal management today consists of several levels. The dike slope reduces the energy of the incoming sea, so that the dike itself does not receive the full impact. Dikes that lie directly on the sea are especially reinforced. The dikes have, over the years, been repeatedly raised, sometimes up to 9 meters, and have been made flatter to better reduce wave erosion, where the dunes are sufficient to protect the land behind them from the sea. These dunes are planted with beach grass to protect them from erosion by wind, water, and foot traffic. Storm tides threaten, in particular, the coasts of the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and Denmark and low-lying areas of eastern England, particularly around the Wash and Fen. Storm surges are caused by changes in barometric pressure combined with strong wind-created wave action. The first recorded storm tide flood was the Julianen Vloed, on the 17th of February 1164. In its wake the Attribution began to form. A storm tide in 1228 is recorded to have killed more than 100,000 people. In 1362, the second Marcellus flood, also known as the Great Mandranker, hit the entire southern coast of the North Sea. Chronicles of the time again record more than 100,000 deaths as large parts of the coast were lost permanently to the sea, including the now legendary lost city of Rungholt. In the 20th century, the North Sea flood of 1953 flooded several nations' coasts and cost more than 2,000 lives. 315 citizens of Hamburg died in the North Sea flood of 1962. Tsunamis, though rare, the North Sea has been the site of a number of historically documented tsunamis. The Storegga slides were a series of underwater landslides, in which a piece of the Norwegian continental shelf slid into the Norwegian Sea. The immense landslips occurred between 8150 BCE and 6000 BCE, and caused a tsunami up to 20 meters high that swept through the North Sea, having the greatest effect on Scotland and the Faroe Islands. The Dover Straits earthquake of 1580 is among the first recorded earthquakes in the North Sea, measuring between 5.6 and 5.9 on the Richter scale. This event caused extensive damage in Calais both through its tremors and possibly triggered a tsunami, though this has never been confirmed. The theory is a vast underwater landslide in the English Channel was triggered by the earthquake, which in turn caused a tsunami. The tsunami triggered by the 1755 Lisbon earthquake reached Holland, although the waves had lost their destructive power. The largest earthquake ever recorded in the United Kingdom was the 1931 Dogger Bank earthquake, which measured 6.1 on the Richter scale and caused a small tsunami that flooded parts of the British coast. Geology. Shallow epicontinental seas like the current North Sea have since long existed on the European continental shelf. The rifting that formed the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, from about 150 million years ago, caused tectonic uplift in the British Isles. Since then, a shallow sea has almost continuously existed between the highs of the Fennoscandian Shield and the British Isles. This precursor of the current North Sea has grown and shrunk with the rise and fall of the eustatic sea level during geologic time. Sometimes it was connected with other shallow seas, such as the sea above the Paris Basin to the southwest, the Paratethys Sea to the southeast, or the Tethys Ocean to the south. During the late Cretaceous, about 85 million years ago, all of modern mainland Europe except for Scandinavia was a scattering of islands. By the early Oligocene, 34 to 28 million years ago, the emergence of Western and Central Europe had almost completely separated the North Sea from the Tethys Ocean, which gradually shrank to become the Mediterranean as southern Europe and southwest Asia became dry land. The North Sea was cut off from the English Channel by a narrow land bridge until that was breached by at least two catastrophic floods between 450,000 and 180,000 years ago. Since the start of the Quaternary period about 2.6 million years ago, the eustatic sea level has fallen during each glacial period and then risen again. Every time the ice sheet reached its greatest extent, the North Sea became almost completely dry. The present-day coastline formed after the last glacial maximum when the sea began to flood the European continental shelf. In 2006, a bone fragment was found while drilling for oil in the North Sea. Analysis indicated that it was a Plateosaurus from 199 to 216 million years ago. This was the deepest dinosaur fossil ever found and the first find for Norway.